Hi, welcome to the channel. Welcome back if you're a current subscriber. Today I'm doing something pretty different than what I normally do. I'm reacting to Explore with Thus's latest video on a guy that I actually happened to date for 3 years, off and on, during high school, Trey Sesler. He is a mass murderer and killed his mother, father, and brother. I was friends with his brother, and I'm going to be telling a little bit of what I know, kind of reacting to this video. So let's get started.
Kind of makes you want to punch him and kill him.
They really wouldn't go by where somewhere there I didn't think about somebody. I guess too much exposure to violence, it built up over all the things that I had like shot and all that stuff.
Just right off the bat, I want to talk about how Trey says that it was, he supposes, long exposure to violence that really built up. I don't believe so. Possibly that could have been part of it, but I don't truly believe that that was what was taking place, because he had been ending the lives of many animals and doing all kinds of things over time. He admitted to, allegedly, this is just what I've heard, helping fuel the Tri-County fires. That occurred a little bit before he actually ended his family's life. Through these things, he was always a psychopath. He was always doing some kind of violent thing, and he had been doing so since he was younger. There's evidence of that. So I don't believe it was long-term exposure to violence that caused this. I think that he always just wanted power and control, as psychopaths do. He was certainly exercising a lot of power and control over me in high school. I'd actually told my story on Investigation Discovery, which I'm thankful I had the opportunity, but there were things that were left out and things that didn't make sense that I kind of hope to clear up in this very video, such as how I mentioned how my hands were tied, but it was in front, which doesn't make a lot of sense to people. When you envision a victim, they usually have their hands tied behind their backs where they can't escape. But this was different. It was coercion. It was part of one of Trey's sick games of power and control, and it didn't make sense. In fact, that's also part of why I didn't report the crime at the time. It was not going to be believed. It didn't seem like a crime. I wasn't processing it as that. I was pretty dissociated. In fact, most of the time it seemed that I was just watching myself go through it, and I wasn't actually experiencing it. And he would tie me up with things, and he would use handcuffs and cords and ropes and things like that. And at the time, I was also self-harming, so I was already wearing long sleeves. It allowed him to be able to do these things without anything being noticed by anybody else. He was also isolating me. He would make sure that he told other people I was stupid, I was crazy. He was in most of my classes except for, I think, one, and that was to control what I was saying to people. The one class I wasn't part of, which was theater for him, and I think math at one point for me, he would do things to make sure he got into that classroom occasionally to see who I was talking to control the narrative. A lot of this I thought at the time was just him being sweet, but it was actually him trying to control who I was talking to and when. And then we wouldn't talk during the summer because nobody he cared about was talking to me during the summer. And when I say cared about, I don't mean he had a connection with, that he genuinely cared about, but that they went to school with him or they lived with him and he didn't want them to know what he was doing to me. So there was a lot of power and control there that at the time I thought was him being sweet and wanting to spend time with me, being a part of a lot of my classes, English, speech, band, biology. We were in so many classes together, and I now see that as he was trying to control the narrative. He was trying to control everything going on. There were times I would try to branch out and date other people, and he would beg those people to break up with me, which they would. And again, when this got back to me, I thought, oh, this was sweet. He just wants to be with me. But I didn't look at it from the angle I should have, which is he wasn't trying to win me back, taking the steps to win me back. He was just begging other people to drop me to make sure they didn't know anything about what was going on, what he had done. And I didn't report him at the time, and I'm sorry this is so long. This is supposed to be a reaction, but I just want to get this out of the way that a lot didn't make sense, because it doesn't make sense when you're in these kinds of relationships, when you're being isolated, coerced through threats, when you're scared of telling people, when you're being called crazy and a liar constantly, and people really believe that about you. And you know, if you report something, you're not going to be easily believed, because the person doing it often has already set up the smear campaign against you, already told people that you are this person, convinced them that you are this person. So when you tell them something like, I'm being abused, I'm being hurt, I'm being tortured, you just come off as a crazy person and a liar. But this is very much what was going on, and I was dissociated constantly constantly. I don't remember a lot of things. What I do remember were times when he would have me tied up. He was coercing me, isolating me. And then at one point he did actually duct tape me, and his mother happened to come in. And I believe at that time that she actually did save me. And I was so dissociated that I remember that moment that I was duct taped. I remember him over me. I remember his dark eyes. I remember his mother coming in, but I don't remember what happened prior to that and what happened after. I don't remember the pain. I don't remember anything about that. But I do remember that there was something about that moment that made me so uncomfortable that I changed schools. I didn't want to be part of any of that anymore, any of those people, especially not Trey. And I happened to switch schools at 17 to get out of that. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure something worse would have happened during that time. And I got out of there, and it wasn't until much later that I reconnected with Trey. He told me he had a pneumothorax, which is a lung problem, that he believed he was going to die. He told me he wasn't good with people. He apologized, sort of. I thought at the time he was apologizing for what he did to me, but what he was actually asking at the time was, did I actually have power over you that I thought I had? And he asked this by asking, was any of it consensual, which it was not. I did not want to be part of any of that. He would not have had to tie me down, duct tape me, coerce me, isolate me, if I'd actually wanted to be part of that. He wasn't actually apologizing at the time, which I thought he was. Okay, back to the video. Sorry, that was so lengthy.
I just want you to know, Liz, they did not suffer. And his whole voice changed from sweet to, I made sure of that.
To his slow and disturbing descent.
All right, first of all, we've changed up our table a little bit. We have this. It's the POS gun. We destroyed pieces and with it, and we're definitely gonna be destroying this after we're done with it. Yu-Gi-Oh was so bad in my mind that I just want to kill somebody up.
Over the years, his videos began to show signs of a deteriorating mental state, with some...
I want to mention here that he did have psychiatric help, that he was seeing a psychiatrist. Someone told me once that he did go to a mental institution, but I'm not sure. There were parts of his life I was kept from, and while I was over there quite a bit, I was allowed in his room. I wasn't introduced to new people. I wasn't shown around the house. It was just straight to his room. We have this project. He made sure we had all these projects together, all these classes together. He was very in control of what was taking place and how things took place. And so there were bits and pieces I actually did not know, I wasn't aware of. Substances he was taking, even his whole YouTube career, I wasn't really all that aware of. I was shown some videos, I was shown some of his editing process while I was there in his room, but he would always tell me that I was too stupid to do it by myself. He wouldn't tell me he was uploading it to YouTube, or if he did, I don't remember him saying that. I don't remember a great deal of that. I didn't know he had a channel until much later, where he became Mr. Anime, or Lynn's Cat Productions. I believe it was a mixture of both. I'm not sure. I wasn't aware of anything going on at that point, except that he did make videos. He did aspire to be a filmmaker, and there were bits here and there that he apparently cried out for help, and patterns of behavior were ignored. But at the same time, behind the scenes offline, he was getting psychiatric help. There really wasn't much more that could have been done. Police had been involved prior. They should have arrested him, but there might have been more to that. I don't know. I can't say what their job was or wasn't, or what they told him or didn't. I just know that more had taken place than what people were aware of. And he was online apparently telling people his plans, and it was going ignored, or seemed to be going ignored, even though it really wasn't. But he did tell me I was too stupid to do YouTube on my own, and too stupid to edit, too stupid to make videos. I wasn't interested in that sort of thing at the time. He never asked me to be part of it. He was trying to keep me separate from everybody and everything else, but there was also just the fact that I wasn't interested in the first place. It wasn't something I aspired to do or wanted to be part of, so there was that. And so now when people bring up that I wasn't in his videos, he never mentioned a girlfriend, that's why, because I was a tool. I wasn't his girlfriend to him, even though that label was being used, even though it was 3 years off and on, and he would ask people not to date me. So I am largely not part of the picture for those reasons.
Reviews lacking his usual enthusiasm.
Shinji Tragic Hero experiences fear and loneliness, and I would like to challenge anyone out there that has never had thoughts of fear or loneliness in their life.
Viewers soon began to notice changes in both his appearance and demeanor, as well as an unsettling shift in content.
Oh, how you doing, everyone? It's Mr. Anime.
That's another thing real quick. People say that he was a loner. He mentions loneliness. He probably did feel lonely because psychopaths lack the ability to form genuine connections, which again is why he didn't mention a girlfriend. He didn't have friends. He had people around that were doing things for him, being part of his videos, making his dreams come true, and not actually friends. So while he knew of the labels of people, I'm going to say allegedly, but he's a psychopath, so they don't form these genuine connections with people on the level that others would believe is normal and sane. So they don't treat people the way that we would treat people. They're not humans, they're just resources.
I wouldn't want to be sitting on that couch right now.
Soon to be revealed are the haunting details of Trey's own confessions, most of which has never been heard before until now. It began on March 20th, 2012, when according to news articles, a welfare check led Waller, Texas authorities to the Sesler family home, the same house that had served as the backdrop for many of Trey's videos. What had once been a stage for fictional violence had become the site of real, unspeakable carnage. In the garage, an older woman was found motionless in her blood-soaked pajamas, half buried beneath a pile of junk and debris. The very same room where Trey once filmed several anime reviews.
Although this isn't actually a horror anime, I think it is. I think it's horrid and horrible. Horrible.
Curled on the floor of the hallway bathroom, a young man lay in a pool of dried blood. The same room that once served as the set for Trey's short film, Keaton.
Oh, he's good.
So now they're getting into the part about the actual crime in March of 2012 when he actually ended the lives of his mother, brother, and father, Rhonda Lawton and Mark Sesler. And here's where I want to say that psychopaths will often go study other psychopaths and what they've done, how they can potentially use those incidents to do it better, to do worse, to destroy more. And so when people like this are platformed on very large platforms, that leads to other psychopaths being able to study those people and see where they may have gone wrong and what could be improved upon so they could do worse damage, how they could get away with it, how they could destroy more and end more lives. So that is just what I personally believe is part of the problem of Trey himself being spoken about more than Rhonda, Mark, and Lawton. And I realize that for the most part, it's not known. There's not a lot known about Mark, Rhonda, and Lawton. The people who knew Trey, who actually knew Trey, don't want to speak up. They want to move past it. They want to heal. As for me, I did for a long time as well, for about 11 years. I didn't say anything for much of the same reasons. I was processing a lot. I remember the day that I was told about this incident. I hadn't had much contact with Trey in a few months, and in a few months prior, he had told me that he wasn't good for people, that he couldn't meet with me, he had a pneumothorax, a lung condition, that he thought he was going to die, that he just wasn't good to be around at the time. And during that time is also the Tri-County fires, and then eventually this incident. And I remember my father coming into the living room, and my mother was holding a newspaper, and they told me what Trey had done. And I was in shock. I never thought that he would do this, even though he had done a lot of really horrifying things to me. I didn't think he would do this. I had watched Mark and Trey walk home together like best friends for years from band practice. They were very close. They had much of the same hobbies. We played Dungeons and Dragons together. I was a bit of a nerd. And we did that a few times, and they had much of the same hobbies and friends and places they would be found together. So this was a shock to me. And at the time, I didn't know that Trey was actually a psychopath. Again, regardless of what he was doing to me, I didn't know about these. I didn't have anything to base that off of. I didn't have normal, stable relationships in my life. My own parents weren't stable people, so that's a whole nother thing to get into. And I just didn't have these versions of actual stable relationships to base this off of, to know that this really wasn't normal, to know that even though I didn't want the pain and the things that he was doing to me, I could report it, I should report it, and that I wasn't actually saying stable, normal behaviors. And so this came as a shock to me. I think my father probably believed I was part of it at first because he knew I knew Trey. But then, of course, I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea. And I actually hadn't really been in contact with Trey. I didn't know he was on substances. He kept a lot from me. And it was just big news in my little community. So I also want to talk about who Mark, Rhonda, and Lawton were. A lot of people think that Rhonda and Lawton were people that just blew off everything, ignored their child. They actually gave him everything. They gave him a new computer, a house, a car, just whatever he wanted. And he would brag about this to me even while we dated, that he got anything he wanted. So he was actually a spoiled brat and not ignored and blown off. His mother did come in the room sometimes, and I felt this was overbearing, but she was actually, maybe even unknowingly, probably unknowingly, saving me from her son. And she did know to an extent, of course, that he was psychotic because she had to get him to a psychiatrist. So she did know. She wasn't a very reactive person, and neither was Lawton. And Lawton had been, I believe, a Yell leader during his time in high school, and Rhonda had been a valedictorian. They were both very outgoing, intelligent, committed people. And then when they had sons, they were at all of the football games. They were really involved in their children's lives. You could see Rhonda in a lot of Trey's own videos. She was involved. She wasn't blowing him off. She just wasn't a very reactive person. And I don't want to personally show any disrespect or insensitivity to his existing family members, but I believe at least one of them has stated that she blew things off that she shouldn't have. If I'm wrong, please let me know. Kindly, please, in the comment section. But they just weren't very reactive people. They weren't over the top shocked and sobbing and hysterics or anything like that at certain events. So it would seem like they blew things off that they didn't. And they were very committed and involved in both Mark and Trey's lives. And Mark had a lot of ambitions of his own. He went to college. He wanted to be in business. He had all of his own hobbies. He was very humorous. He would crack jokes in band class. He was very loved and also loved his brother very much. So that's what I could share about that part of the family. I really hope that eventually other friends and family members will speak out about what they know about Mark, Rhonda, and Lawton, because I believe they deserve to be remembered more than Trey does. That Trey should just fade from existence. And I know I personally have brought him up, and I've personally told my story on Investigation Discovery, but I really hope that what people get out of this is that Mark, Rhonda, and Lawton were great individuals, that they deserve to be remembered.
An older man was found still in his bed, with his legs hanging over the side and his head pressed into the pillow. Each of the 3 victims sustained multiple gunshot wounds.
The only reason we're here is because the freaking police seized my property with the martial arts training center because we killed 3 people.
Nearly every room in the house reflected a violent outburst, with wrecked furniture, shattered picture frames, and holes in the drywall. Scrawled across the walls was a chilling confession, leaving no doubt the man behind the mass murders was Trey Eric Sesler. After the horrifying discovery, police tracked...
I want to talk about this stupid door, because a lot of people believe that this is his mark that shows he had remorse. But if you watch the interrogation video, he was not remorseful. Psychopaths cannot be remorseful. He had 0 remorse for this crime. And the door, when it says, "Please forgive me, God, please forgive me, I can't forgive myself," is not, "I'm sorry I did this, I didn't want to do this, I shouldn't have done this," which would be actual remorse. That's not what that was. That was him most likely setting up the scene to look like he was remorseful, to look like he cared, to look like he was insane, which he technically was, and not a sign that he was actually sad about what he did, because what he did not say was, "I'm sorry." Even in the interrogation, he did not say, "I'm sorry." He did not break down in tears. There was no glabella furrowing there between the eyebrows, nothing, no grief. So he's not sorry. He's never been sorry. He could not have done this and had been sorry about it. This level of a crime. It wasn't self-defense. He was not in any harm. There was no patterns of abuse. Even though I was kept from a lot of things, I could tell you pretty confidently that that family did not hurt him, that he did not have to act out of self-defense, that there were tensions in home because of Trey being lazy, not getting a real job, tensions with his father, things like that. But aside from that, there was no need for self-defense, especially not against all 3 of his family members. Mark cared deeply about him. Rhonda cared deeply about him. I'm sure Lawton did as well, his father. So to commit a crime this horrific, and then he had planned even more, which if you go to Explore with Us's video, you will see he planned to do more. He planned to be a school shooter, to commit even more horrific crimes. And someone like that, someone who has studied crime to the degree he had, been inspired by the Columbine shooting to do the things he did to me and the things he did to animals, because he did kill his own pets. He would cry to me over the phone about his chickens dying. I didn't know at the time he was killing them. And to commit those levels of crimes and to practice practice that often and study that much is not someone who typically is remorseful and sad about what they've done. It's more power control and setting things up, being conniving and playing this all out. I also look at one particular time that I remember him driving to my house for the first time and him asking me, oh, is this the view that you typically see every day, that you get to see? And I thought that he thought maybe the area was beautiful because I lived in a more rural area than he did. There were a lot of pastures and greenery. It could be kind of pretty to some people. So I believed at the time he was appreciating that. But now I look back and think that maybe what was actually happening was he was scouting the area to see that there were a lot of cows and he could practice shooting those cows and other animals in the area. It was rural, there were no street lights. It was the perfect place for him to do that. I don't have evidence that's what he did, but I just look back at that moment and see that most likely that's what he was doing. And before I end this, I also want to share some pictures I have that kind of show, this was him in English class. I was there, I checked this picture, it's kind of blurry, but there he is. And then us again, and we were with, I would say mutual friends. They were more his friends, but he's there. And then I have this photo that Mark sent me because we would write letters back and forth after he graduated, a little bit before he graduated. We were friends, not close friends, but we were writing letters and I was getting to know him. So that's his graduation photo. I'm going to end this here. I'm not going to go through every bit of this video with Explore with Us, but there were some things I wanted to talk about, parts of my story that didn't make sense, that were cut out, or just I wanted to elaborate on. So please let me know your thoughts in the comments section. This isn't my normal content. Normally I do body language analysis, and just let me know your thoughts and hit the like button. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching.